Okay, real talk. Anyone else guilty of hitting that snooze button way too many times before actually dragging themselves out of bed?
Because, uh, let me tell you, the struggle is real over here.
But you know what they say?
The early bird gets the worm.
Well, what's really interesting is that it's not quite as straightforward as just being an early bird or, a night owl.
It's about figuring out our individual chronotype. It's like our own internal clock for when we naturally wake up and go to sleep.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely heard of that. I always thought it was just a convenient excuse for, my late night tendencies, but it's actually like a real scientific thing.
Totally. It's like having a slightly different time zone than everyone else, biologically speaking.
Some of us are naturally more alert in the morning, your classic early birds. Others, they hit their stride a little later in the day, and then there's like a whole spectrum in between.
Okay, so let's dive into this whole chronotype thing, right? We've got a ton of research here exploring why some people are early birds, others are night owls, and that struggle of, trying to make our sleep schedules work in a world that seems to love those early risers.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners?
The key is that you don't have to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit. We're not all meant to be morning people, and that's okay.
The research you've gathered is really fascinating. Like, chronotypes actually impact everything from our energy levels and focus to even things like creativity and how we solve problems.
Okay, hold on. So how do we actually figure out where we fall on this spectrum? Is it just about how much coffee I need to feel human before noon?
Well, there's actually a questionnaire, and it's designed to help people figure out their chronotype.
One of the studies you sent from mentioned source name, but not the author, as we do not name sources in the script, they ask about, like, when you naturally feel most alert, when you prefer to sleep, that kind of thing.
Then, based on your answers, it puts you into one of four main categories:
Lions, bears, wolves, and dolphins.
lions, bears, wolves, and dolphins. Okay, now this is getting interesting. I'm here for a good animal analogy.
So tell me more about these chronotype categories.
Okay, so picture this.
Lion,
They're like your classic early risers.
the ones who, like, jump out of bed,
Yeah.
raring to go.
Yeah. Exactly. Super productive in the morning, but, they tend to wind down earlier in the evening.
And then you've got your bears,
They're more in tune with that, like, natural solar cycle.
like a bear waking up with the sun and then, slowing down when it sets.
Yeah, exactly. They've got that nice balanced energy throughout the day.
Now the wolves,
Those are your night owls.
the ones that burning the midnight oil.
You've got it. They're often most energized and creative later in the day, sometimes even like crazy early morning hours.
And then last but not least, we've got the dolphins.
Dolphins. Okay, this is a new one. What's their deal?
So dolphins, they tend to have these, like, less conventional sleep patterns.
They might be light sleepers. They wake up easily.
And they might find, like, different times throughout the day when they're more alert.
They don't really fit neatly into that early bird or night owl box.
So interesting. I'm already trying to figure out which one I am. But knowing your chronotype is cool and all, but how does that actually help us, like, navigate this whole sleep productivity thing, especially when it feels like the world is made for early birds?
Right. And that's like the big question.
One of the most important things is that you can't really change your chronotype. Like, you can't rewire your biology completely.
It's more about working with what you've got. Optimizing your schedule and your environment to match when you naturally function best.
So you're saying if I'm a wolf, I shouldn't try to force myself to be a lion.
Exactly. Like, if you're a wolf and you try to power through some super complex task first thing in the morning,
It's probably not going to go so well, right?
you might find that later in the day, those creative juices are flowing and you're like a problem-solving machine. That's the time to tackle those bigger projects.
Okay, that makes so much sense. I've definitely been there trying to fight my natural rhythm. It just leads to burnout. So what about the actual, like, practical stuff?
Didn't some of the research mention strategies for like optimizing our routines based on our chronotype?
They did. It's not like a one-size-fits-all situation, but more like a good starting point.
So, for the lions out there, the key is to really maximize that morning energy.
One study talked about having a structured morning routine
Yeah.
and not just, chugging coffee and running out the door.
But actually incorporating things that are good for you mentally and physically.
So, like, exercise,
Mm.
meditation, or even just actually enjoying your breakfast instead of, like, scarfing it down.
Exactly. It's about setting yourself up for a good day, you
Yeah.
know? And for the wolves, who might not be morning people, it's about protecting that peak productivity time.
Which for them might be when everyone else is, like, already asleep.
Exactly. Setting boundaries and communicating those boundaries is super important.
Like if you're most productive from, say, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., you got to let people know and minimize distractions during that time.
So it's about creating an environment that works, even if it's not the typical 9 to 5.
Totally. And then we have the bears. They've usually got that more balanced energy throughout the day.
For them, it's all about consistency.
And those strategic breaks, to avoid burnout.
So even if their internal clock kind of matches the workday, they still need to be mindful and recharge.
You got it.
Now, for our dolphins, with those unique sleep patterns, it often takes a bit more of a personalized approach.
They might have to experiment a bit more to find what works, huh?
Exactly. Paying attention to their energy levels is key.
Like when are they feeling super sharp and when are they dragging?
Instead of trying to squeeze into a traditional schedule, it might be better to work in those shorter, more focused bursts when they're naturally more alert.
It's amazing how much our bodies tell us if we just actually listen. But I bet a lot of our listeners are thinking, yeah, this is all great, but actually changing my sleep routine, that's a whole other story.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not about doing some crazy 180 overnight.
One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to change everything all at once.
And that just leads to giving up.
So instead of trying to become like a whole new sleep chronotype, what are some things our listeners can actually do to make those changes, gradually?
One of the simplest but most powerful things is actually light therapy.
It sounds kind of intense, but it's
Yeah.
really just about getting that bright light, especially sunlight, early in the morning.
Right.
It can really help reset that internal clock of yours.
That makes sense. Even a little bit of sunshine in the morning can change my whole mood. But what about those of us who, don't really get a lot of sunlight? Especially depending on the time of year.
That's where those light therapy lamps come in handy.
They basically mimic natural sunlight, and they can be, surprisingly effective in regulating your sleep. And the best part is, you don't even need to, sit in front of them for hours.
Just 20, 30 minutes every morning can make a difference.
So we're talking small changes, consistency, and a little tech help if needed.
That feels way more doable than completely overhauling your whole sleep schedule just because, I don't know, someone said lions are better or something.
It's all about working with what your body naturally wants to do.
Figuring out what works for you, whether you're a lion, bear, wolf, or even a dolphin.
I love that. It's like we're all just trying to figure out this whole sleep thing and how to be productive at the same time.
Exactly. Pay attention to your energy levels.
Yeah.
When do you feel super focused and when do you start to, zone out?
'Cause that's going to tell you a lot about how to create a schedule that actually works for you.
It's all about listening to your body, not fighting it.
Exactly. Now, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you today.
So to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a little something to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
Now that you know about chronotypes and all this sleep science stuff, what's one tiny change you could make this week to, make your sleep routine a bit better?
Like maybe setting an actual sleep schedule, getting a little morning sunlight, or even just being more aware of your energy throughout the day.
It's those little things that can make a big difference, right?
Absolutely. It's not a race. Be patient with yourself. And remember, a good night's sleep can work wonders.
So true. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive on chronotypes and sleep. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about your own sleep style. Until next time, keep those sleep questions coming.